Welcome to AuthentiCity FM, where real stories, bold ideas, and better communities come to life. I'm Phil Corrali, joined by my friends and co-hosts Corri Spiegel and Mike Sable. Whether we're sharing candid reflections, tackling big ideas, or spotlighting leaders like our guests today, our goal is always the same: to bring authentic conversations forward to help build and support the best in city and county management. If you're enjoying this journey we're on, be sure to subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Oh, and while you're at it, leave us a review and a comment or two, and we'll really appreciate that. Today's guest is an author, speaker, collaborator, and thought leader, as well as a master communicator, gifted photographer, and just a world-class human, Nick Kittle. Over the last decade or so, Nick has helped governments embrace what he's coined sustainability, sustainable innovation that lasts. He's worked with leaders across the country to reimagine how we serve communities, always bringing his unique energy, creativity, and heart. So tonight we'll dive into that, but we'll also talk about how this native Midwesterner and Bears fan, we will not talk about the Bears' performance last night, however, blends barbecue with team building, his upcoming book filled with made-up words, and the inspiration he finds climbing Colorado's 14ers. So settle in for a wide-ranging conversation with Nick about building momentum for lasting change and how reframing life's challenges can open the door to joy, creativity, and a little fun along the way. Let's get started.
Thanks, Phil, for having me on. I really appreciate it. And Corri, Mike, really honored to be here. I would like to immediately lower the bar after that wonderful introduction, if that is at all possible. But I'm excited to have the conversation because I think this is going to be really fun and fascinating. And it's always great to hear your perspectives on the other shows. And I'm excited to get grilled by Mike and, get questions from the best dressed man in all of local government and just, have
That's Mike too. So it's like everything, there's so many opportunities to talk to Mike tonight. That's great. Nick, we're so glad you're here. Thanks for joining us. I've been a fan of yours since I first saw you at an ICMA conference. I'm trying to remember which one it was. It might have been Nashville. It might have been Columbus. It might have been both. You are a fixture to so many of us in ICMA. And I remember you vividly because my first chance to see you lead a session, you were on the big stage. You were wearing decidedly non-typical conference presenter apparel. I remember a plaid shirt of some sort and jeans, and I'm like, that's unique. I haven't seen that before. I'm here for it. I am excited to see this guy talk. And you roped me in very quickly, just with your engaging style, but also just the message that you deliver. So we're thrilled to have you here. We're thrilled to talk a little bit tonight about your ideas on sustainable innovation. I would love, if we can, to start with the sustainability story.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate that that impression that I got the opportunity to make right out of the gate there.
It was good.
As the battle of who could care less apparently was my starting condition, which I love. When it comes to this space, for me, Phil, I spent 15 years working in local governments, and now nearly 25 working with local governments. And for me, founded one of the first 5 local government innovation offices in the country. We had to do something radically different than had ever been done before because we were a mid-sized city and a very conservative city. And so we kind of created our own model for how to go ahead and do innovation in government. And as a practitioner, for me, it was important to share those lessons. And so that's kind of where sustainability came from. Was I saw so many people who found it difficult to innovate in government. And as I went through the process of doing pilot programs, I have over 65 in my career, and some of them were successful and some of them weren't. I certainly was the headline in the newspaper and, people showing up on my doorstep. Those are real stories that happened, but also wildly creative ideas that had never been done in communities before. And for me, it was, how can I help others understand, one, why this is important, but two, how do you actually do it? And so for me, that was the passion space I was operating out of. And so it was, can I get the credibility to understand what it's like to operate in conservative versus liberal, city versus county? Spent some time in Adams County as their chief innovation officer, solidified the lessons from both Colorado Springs and Adams County, and then wrote the book about it from the things that I learned from being a practitioner. So to my mind, it's like we actually hired a consultant one time who had never worked in government to come in and talk to us about innovation. And the monumental amount of crap that they didn't know about what we do was utterly dismaying and at the same time consistent. So to me, it was like, let's go do this. I can help others understand how we do what needs to be done. And that's where Sustainavation came from. So now what I do is I've worked with over 100 communities across the country in the last 8 years. It's been my absolute honor to do that. And I like to say I help great people do great things. That's what I'm here to do, whether it's, everything from strategic planning to training and development workshops, teaching the tenets of high performance government and how we build high performance government, whether it's helping them build innovation into what they do, or as you alluded to, whether it's doing it through different lenses like Beyond the Smoke and leadership and development events there as well. So to me, I like to keep it weird, and I think we can do serious work and have a lot of fun doing it. And I don't understand why everybody's so serious all the time, but I mean, let's have some fun and then find a way to go ahead and build this into a culture that it doesn't matter when elected leaders change or when appointed leaders change. The culture of innovation is built into the organization and it cannot be unraveled. And that's sort of my hidden goal. Also very difficult to do, but I'm proud because I've had a lot of opportunities to work with some really cool communities.
So, Nick, I have a question. So, Phil alluded that you started your life in Illinois. How does a kid from Illinois end up in Colorado?
Not easily. It took a lot of effort to get the hell out of. Just kidding.
Oh,
Just kidding. Just kidding.
No, we're absolutely here for Illinois jokes. Keep them coming.
yes.
So so for me, my story is, hey, I'm a Bears fan. That's the true story. I grew up in Bellflower, Illinois, which is population 400, outside of Mansfield and Rantoul. For those of you in the area, you might, and I do mean might, know where that's at. Bellflower, I think, just became a dot on a map about 3 years ago. Really excited.
Yeah.
One of the things in town was that we would go change the number at the edge of town on the population sign every month when somebody was born or died. They have hit 404 people, as I understand it. So explosive population growth there, which is really exciting to see. So I think they're turning the corner.
They finally recovered from you moving, is what you're saying.
That is,
Yeah.
that is it. And finally, I might actually be invited back someday to speak at a graduation or something if there was still a school that hadn't burned to the ground. And so, for that, I had the opportunity to move to Indiana and live in California and went to Purdue and got a job working outside. My first job was working for Amoco, actually. If people remember Amoco, British Petroleum bought them out my first day on the job. I also had the interactions and the opportunities to work with, when I was with El Paso Natural Gas, groups like Enron. And I met Skilling and Lay, and I went through what I'll say is experiences that helped me understand the deep corruption that exists inside of corporations. And so it was funny because I started my way through that journey, and I actually took two guys' jobs who were laid off, and they replaced them with me the first day I met these guys, and they were laid off. And so it sort of gave me this really different taste and understanding of how the world works. And, for that, it was like, okay, they had to offer me a severance package the first day, which said that we're going to give you $5,000 towards your master's degree if you want to do it. So I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And I'll use that as my excuse to move to Colorado. So that's how I ended up in Colorado, was through that. And then candidly, one day, I started a company, and we got a light suit out by patent trolls. I would have been a billionaire at 27, basically. And then found myself bankrupt and unemployed. And I was drinking pretty good one night and thought to myself, hey, I'm going to apply for some jobs. And so I did. And I applied for a variety of jobs. And then one of them happened to be in local government. And I ended up getting an interview for it and dumb lucked my way into local government, for lack of a better word, and then fell in love with it.
So I have so many questions from there. You talked about Adams County and Colorado Springs. And I could not think of probably two more different governments and communities in the Front Range. So walk us through kind of what you learn working in organizations and communities who are like so disparately different.
Yeah, it's a really it's a fun observation. I'll say that. Colorado Springs, for those who don't know, is a very conservative community. I was there, for quite a while. And what I learned was I had the opportunity to observe government functioning at a very high level at a very young age. And I was there for the transition from the council manager to the strong mayor form of government. The reason that happened was because we shut off the streetlights, quit watering the parks, and quit running the buses, which was a very famous story at the time. And so part of that was we need to think differently. Can you help us do that? And what's that look like? What I learned there is I learned some interesting lessons. And Adams County is a more liberal county. And so, much different agricultural, very agricultural. And so very urban to very agricultural, multiple communities, very different mindsets. I learned a couple lessons. One is that the scarcity mindset that Colorado Springs had actually wasn't a negative to them in some ways, because we went through every single year that I was there for probably the first 6 or 7 years were budget cuts. It was always cutting. It was always do more with less was the constant refrain. So there was always a push on the efficiency front, not necessarily on the innovation front, but the efficiency side of the equation, which is very different. It can be very demoralizing, but there was never an opportunity missed to find efficiencies in the work that we did because it meant saving somebody's job or delivering a service that would otherwise be cut. So there was this drive out of the employees there that's still there today. There's this drive there that was really just fascinating and fantastic. Adams County, on the other hand, was looking to, find services that they could offer that were new and different thought processes because they were, quite frankly, flush with cash. So, what happened is that the way we've always done it, which is a term that I hate and would get you kicked out of my office back in the day, that was more of the mindset was it was okay for us to do the things we've been doing because we're not hurting. And so there wasn't an impetus to innovate necessarily. And so it was trying to help people see value in innovation before it's required. The advantage to that was funding wasn't the issue. And so things that I would have to do in Colorado Springs to go get money for projects that otherwise would never see the light of day, I didn't have to do in Adams County. They just gave me the latitude to experiment with concepts that had never been done before. And all they wanted was the opportunity to show the results and as commissioners be able to brag about the work that was being done. So that, I think, are two very high-level sort of viewpoint differences between those two. If that sort of, drives where you're going at.
Well, I was just gonna ask, kind of as a follow up to that, the juxtaposition of like innovation for the sake of survival versus innovation for the sake of opportunity. It clearly, in those two experiences, probably felt a little bit on opposite ends of that spectrum. I would say in many cases, when we talk about innovating, when we talk about trying to do something differently or better than we had been, it's somewhere in between those two extremes, right? The fun of just getting to innovate for the fun of it is unique. And hopefully we're not always in that circumstance where it's, oh my God, if we don't do this, what are we going to, we're going to shut down a division or a department or lay off 20 or 30 people. So your experience of helping people at the spectrums is one thing, but what about in the middle, that middle zone of changing thought around the way we've always done it?
Yeah, that's what I'll say is that's where a lot of communities that I work with are at. Is they're somewhere in the middle. They're not in a scarcity space. They're not like deep budget cuts. Some of them are the high performers who just want to continue to be at the highest performing level they can, and they've got the extra capacity to be able to do some of those things. In that middle space, the real functional challenge becomes typically dealing with old guard mindsets around why should I change and some of that kind of thing, and helping folks come along. And there's a difference between having authority and leading by authority and then leading by influence, which are very different spaces. And in that middle space, you've got to learn to lead by influence, not authority. In both of the other cases, you can kind of call your shots, but in the middle, it's about activating the middle percentage of the employee population that doesn't know that they have a choice to experience something different. And so for me, it's always a battle of the folks in the middle that we're trying to win over the hearts and minds of and help them see possibility. So, what I'll say is there's advantages to both of the polar ends of the equation that don't exist in the middle, because there is a will it ever get better mindset. Well, no, but it could be worse mindset. And that is stagnation waiting to happen. So a lot of the time it's about getting people inspired and reconnected to the mission of what we do, and helping them see that this is about turning fear into possibility. Um, so many of the things that hold us back are just self-limiting beliefs and self-limiting understandings. And so what was great about those opposites is that you can always frame the argument in a way to win it. And in the middle, you have to be careful. So in Colorado Springs, I would always try and get the argument down to, well, Nick, we would do that if we ever had the money for it. Okay, cool. But if we had the money, you'd be down for me doing this, yeah? Well, yeah, but if you can ever figure it out, cool. Now I've got you down to money. And I'll go fundraise this and I'll go find the money to make this happen. And that was a gift. And on the other side of the equation in Adams County, it was how wild's the idea and what population can it serve that's maybe never been served before, or what problem can get solved that we can solve before it ever exists, which is a space we don't get to play in government very often. We wait for the problem to exist, then we can solve it. No one awards you for solving a problem that doesn't exist in your community. That's a space that is really hard. So the space in the middle is tough because you don't have either of those forces kind of pulling or pushing. So we've got to wake the employees up to, yeah, you know what? I'm here to empower you, but that's also part of the sustainability model, right? I'm here to empower you to be able to go do great things. Here's the mechanisms by which I'm going to protect you and create some safety for you to be able to have your ideas come forward. And now you've got hope because your idea is getting funded, your idea is getting seen, it's getting attention. And now the only question becomes, how dedicated are you? How interested are you? And decisions are made by those that show up. So to my mind, if people want to take that opportunity, we are creating that opportunity for them. And for a lot of folks that don't, innovation isn't for everyone. No harm, no foul. Just do me a favor and stay out of the way of those of us who care enough to try new things.
So I like how you kind of parse it into those three buckets, and I'll take you on a little path right now. Mike and I love to talk about historical cycles, and I feel like we are on the precipice of real disruption. And it can be workforce leaving, so you have retirement by generational kind of stature. You have people leaving the profession because it's not always kind. You have technology, which is just doing wild and crazy things, and we haven't even begun to really understand where we're headed on that. And then you have, I'm just going to call it Washington, D.C. doing whatever it is it's currently doing right now, right? So, I mean, if you could put chaos in a cup, I would call that. And so from the lens of innovation, I suspect you see this as a really grand opportunity, but kind of walk us through where you see life going in local government really in this next probably year, because the next year, at least the way I see it, is probably the most scary.
Yeah, it's a great point. You know, there's certainly a lot of things that inject uncertainty, but I'm a big fan of the unknown is just the unknown. It is neither good nor bad. That is it. And so in this space, there is a lot of unknown. And you know, so here's a couple things that I see. And so my thought process is I always look at, you know, sort of what are the ripples that are being created by the introduction of different characteristics. And so there's the Washington characteristic, there's the AI characteristic, there's the retirement characteristic, there's the recruit, you know, there's burnout, there's several other sort of threads that you can kind of throw a stone in and see the ripples on. And so I see these a little bit differently in terms of, you know, in terms of what government has that other professions do not have. It has a real sense of purpose and connection to its community. So the advantage there is that you can point to people the very real difference that they make in the lives of the people who are their neighbors, which means that there's an actual heart pull that happens to be really important to younger generations, you know, and also people who are getting closer to retirement too. That's a truth as well, which is there folks are looking to legacy build. Well, there's a way to do that through the work that we do in local government. We can create those opportunities for folks to do that. So I see that as part of the draw and the advantage that we have. The reality is we can't compete with the price. We can't compete with certain things the private sector can offer in terms of pay and those kinds of things, but we can be more plugged in as humans in this case to the needs of the people that we work with, because Harvard did a study, and what they came out with was basically that over the course of time, the people who are the most successful and being productive over the course of their lifetimes work at 85% capacity, not 100% capacity. So that is the sustained long-term productivity high point, and that's what we're after. And if we can find a way to help people get there, and recognize that's it, you know, like that's what we're actually after, is that sort of thing. Difficult, not easy for sure. But again, if we're targeting that, that's something that the private sector isn't interested in replicating, to be honest with you. They're here to suck. They're here to suck what's left of your soul. They don't want the best of you. They want the rest of you. So in my mind, this is about the opposite of that, right? We don't want the rest of you. We want the best of you, which means we're going to find ways to connect you with the mission, give you the opportunities to learn and grow and become a better, more competent professional. We're going to find ways to go ahead and shield you from those dynamics. Like you said, people are cruel. It's the difference that is in the world right now, is cruelty has been accepted as a form of discussion, and it is somewhat largely and widely accepted by a lot of people. I roundly reject that. I do not subscribe to that, and I make it clear to people that I work with, they should not either. There's a difference between how we show up, and I actually have a chapter in the book on it, Building Your Personal Armor in Sustainability, about this specific topic, how to keep your wits about you as you go through the difficult work that needs to be done, especially in local government. So to me, that's part of it. It's the mindset shift of, I'm here and I get to do important work, and I don't got to do this work. I get to do this work, and that is a radically different sort of space. When it comes to the space of like AI and the ripples with that, I think that AI is going to become increasingly important, not to the technology side, but what's missing on the other side of that is authentic interaction. And that's the AI I'm talking about. So for my mind, that's the AI I'm interested in, which is, as things become more automated and as jobs get cut, which we haven't seen yet, because no CEO has had the courage to be the first one to say, I'm going to destroy the fabric of society by laying off 80% of my workforce, which is a very real possibility within the next 5 to 10 years. Nobody wants to be that first one over the cliff, but once the lemmings start to go, they will all jump off the cliff, and you're going to see mass layoffs, which is going to be a very different mindset shift. So what AI cannot do that we can do is create opportunities for authentic interaction. And that means interpersonal skills and interpersonal relationships are probably going to become the only tradable commodity that matters at some point in the future. So to my mind, this type of work right here, the work that we do as people, helping people, and this pushes the customer service narrative forward, this is part of it, which is, if we're creating those moments of connection, that's great. When it comes to the stuff and the turmoil in Washington, look, you can't stop stupid and you can't stop crazy. And I'm just going to say that plain as fact. I believe in science. I believe science shows us things that are provable by fact. I believe that fact is the thing that allows us to move forward as a society. And I think that's been proven over the centuries. I think that the backsliding that's happening right now is an incredibly dangerous space. I believe that the defunding that's going on is part and parcel with the, intentional destruction of certain elements of our society, designed to strip us of our individual rights and our ability to be collectively good together. So I don't know if that helps you lean on my politics, but I'm not trying to go political with it. I will just say that there's intelligent cuts, and we've seen people make good cuts in local government when service requirements are met. And then there's things that are just dumb. And sometimes the stuff is just dumb, and some of this stuff is just straight dumb. So that's going to push it from the federal level to the state level. The state people are still politicians on that scale as well. They're not going to want to touch it. So within a year, you're going to see it getting pushed into the local level, which means that local government will become the important battleground for a lot of service delivery across the country. And so that's what I see happening, is I actually see the role of local government becoming infinitely more important, not less important, as the federal government decides to cut whatever its cuts are, or make punitive decisions based on the red or blueness of a state, or those kinds of things. Those decisions are going to get pushed from the state level. There are going to be politicians there who don't want to deal with it, down to the local level. And then it'll be up to us to grapple with some of these topics, hopefully with some of the funding and not just the unfunded mandates to come with it.
I'm going to say 3 things in response. So one, I appreciate you saying the word authenticity a couple of times, because this is AuthentiCity FM. This is a space where we actually try to create that. So I appreciate the plug, whether it was intentional or not. It worked perfectly. 2, I 100% agree that like the local government level is the sort of the last functioning level of government in society. And there's a reason for that. And it's because like the people on this podcast and the people who watch it care about being stewards of democracy. And so that is a fundamental role that we have. But I want to go back to something that you said earlier, and I want you to maybe expand on a little bit. You talked about sort of the bookends, right? You've got authority and power, and you've got the tension for the people in the middle. We know, all right, our podcast listeners tend to be, they skew younger, they skew female. And so just based on math in the professional government, they're not in the top chair yet. Our job, or well, one of our jobs is to convince them that it is amazing and they should do it. But so for people in the middle, you talked about needing to build influencing skills. What does some of those skills look like? And maybe, do you have a couple of examples of organizations you've worked with where you were like, yeah, that person tucked in the middle of the organization is just dynamic and powerful, secret weapon in the organization. Maybe can you talk a little bit more about that middle influence?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think, to answer your last question first, that is definitely part of what I do when I work with organizations, especially when I'm doing ongoing engagements. One and dones, I'm not trying to do that with, because people leave impressions, and that's not necessarily an accurate space to start from. But when it comes to that, identifying the folks in the middle that are definitely talented, that are basically just trapped there, typically because of sort of our mindset, or our sort of traditional mindset, which is you've put in your 25 years, so now you're promoted to the department head role. You're now the department head until you retire. And you could be sitting in that role for 10, 12, 15 years while the people under you languish, quite frankly. They'll get poached by somebody else. So let's recognize the real risk here is that we lose our talent if we don't find ways to identify and promote them. So it's definitely something I look for. In terms of what that looks like in the room, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the people. You're not cool if you sit in the back of the bus anymore. You're cool if you sit up front and you offer up solutions, you join the conversation, you put yourself out there. And authenticity, Mike, to your point, is a big part of me understanding that. And when folks lean in a way that is uncomfortable in the room, and they're willing to put themselves out there, whether it's received well by the room or not, that's a person I'm paying attention to for the rest of the time I'm with them. And very often I'm working with HR directors, city managers, assistant city managers, and they want to know, did you see anybody in the room who we should keep an eye on? And I can name probably a dozen examples off the top of my head where somebody I identified in the room who's now an assistant city manager, or now the director of their department, or those kinds of things. So it definitely happens from the work that I do. So it's not just that, but it's how they participate and how they show up in those rooms. But it's also, do they do the work once they're outside the room? You can go to a training and it's like, oh, okay, well, he'll be back next week to hold me accountable or whatever. Instead, they're the ones who take the tools that I use and they're ping me separately on LinkedIn and they're like, hey, Nick, I'm trying this out. Could you maybe guide me a little bit with some of this? So those folks who are reaching out and making the effort, they're the ones who I think every city manager wants, right? You want to let your talent go do great things and rein them in if you need to, not the other way around, which is push spaghetti uphill, right? Like that's not what we're after. So in terms of that middle space, some of the skills to be successful and how do we do that was, I think, the other part of that question. So part of this is I do believe that your ability to communicate is key. And your ability to understand the audiences with which you're communicating is a critically valuable skill that is not taught and not well understood. And even if you go to a class, it's really hard to do it. So I'll say one of the things that I talk about that I think is really important from that perspective is for them to understand, be bright, be brief, be gone. And so be bright is get your energy up. If you're not excited about what you're talking about, why on earth would anybody else ever be? Be brief. People don't need to know everything you know in order to make a decision. They need to know what they need to know in order to make a decision. And those are not the same things. And be gone. Once the decision is made, good or bad, leave the room. Richard Branson kept saying, I'll never keep doing business with somebody who keeps selling me after I said yes. Right? And too often, that's kind of where the people who are too talkative get to, is they end up talking themselves out of something that they had a win in. So I think understanding different audiences, and just like communicating down, communicating up are both important skill sets for that middle. But when it comes to the influence, my thing was always, how can I help support what your passion is? So the question I like to ask people is, what's your passion? So if you're working with a work team and you don't know what they're passionate about, no matter what the answer is, that's something worth discovering, because you will see people light up if you ask them the question, what's your passion? And just by virtue of that, if I can help you get a little bit closer, I understand a little bit more about you, we will work tirelessly for each other, in service of each other, to sort of build that larger team us. And once we have that, then we can build momentum, whether or not we are in leadership roles. And that's the kind of thing that gets you noticed. And so a lot of the work in my early career was about building that coalition of the willing to come together and do it, whether anybody had the funding for it or wanted us to do it or whatever that looks like. That's the kind of skills you want to see out of that middle level. And then help them understand what the politics of the organization are. so that they can avoid the third rail, which is just the thing that every organization and community has, right? So it's like, how do I teach you how to just not step on that so that you can continue to be successful? And then how do I, as the boss of you, put you in the right rooms to continue to grow who you are? I want to editorialize a little bit further and say there's three things that I ask a question in my workshops, and it's what prevents you from being successful. And there are three answers that are always the ones at the top of the list. And it is fear of failure, it's perfectionism, and it's imposter syndrome. And given that your audience is predominantly female and younger, I'll say this: imposter syndrome is something that women suffer far more from men. So that's a fact. That's an 80%, 20%. So it's definitely something that women suffer from more than men. But men will apply for a job if they have just one qualification to do the job. Women won't apply for a job if they have all the qualifications and are missing one, right? So if you're especially a woman in the middle of your organization, I just want you to know that you are in that role because you bring value. You are in that role because you should be there, and you are great at what you do. So the next time that opportunity comes up where you have a shot at it, put your name in the hat so that you can elevate your game on that level. And that's just something, for that audience in particular, that's something I see holding them back is the space of, well, I better make sure I've got all the credentials. You don't have to. You just need to be willing to learn to be a better person and to be a better manager, a better leader, a better subject matter expert, whatever it is. That just is one of those self-limiting beliefs that doesn't need to exist.
So I think Phil and I had successive oofs during what you just said. And yes, I will never have enough letters behind my name, even though I have too many letters behind my name already. So I want to pull on something a little bit, because you talked about it really eloquently from the middle, right? And from that employee. One of the best compliments I ever got as a leader was from one of my most trusted kind of executive team members. And she said to me, your superpower is being able to see in others what they don't see in themselves.
Hear, hear.
And so I loved finding the people in the organization, to your point, more often women than not, who didn't apply, were afraid to apply, didn't think they could do X, Y, or Z. And I was almost infamous for, hey, I have an idea. Do you want to talk to me about it? And bar none, every single one of them, super successful at a job they never considered. And so let's flip that on its head to say, if you're a manager and that's not your superpower, it's just one I got blessed with and I'm grateful for. How do you very intentionally go about trying to find the talent in your organization that you might not realize is there?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think, to my mind, again, I'm always looking for those people who are willing to take on the task, or they come with the solutions as well as with the problem, and here's my idea on it. I usually am looking for somebody with the mindset of, and this was, and I was blessed because I had three great female mentors that helped sort of grow my understanding of different spaces. And one of them, Dr. Penelope Colbreth-Graft, she's an amazing woman. What she taught me was, it's about finding a way to get to yes. It's not the yes that they want, it's the yes that you both can live with. And that's what you're after. And so I'm always looking for people with that mindset of, yeah, we can't do that, but we could do this. And that's the mindset I'm always looking for, to identify kind of what that talent looks like. Now, growing it is a different thing, kind of developing it is a different thing. And so if you're one of those managers that maybe doesn't have, the type of eye that you have, and I would imagine I'm dealing with three individuals who have that type of eye, the ability to spot two individuals who have that type of eye. Okay, one individual who has that type of eye. I think the space there is, if you're great at, if you can't identify the talent and you don't know, I'm a big fan of management by walking around. And so to me, you show up and you walk through the building and you stop off at people's desks and you get to just have a chat with them about it. Oh, is that your cat? Very cool. What's their name? And, you're just trying to understand your people better so that you can maybe plug into that. Because I think when you get hierarchical in your thinking, you're probably just worried about the chain of command, and usually from a productivity perspective. I've got so much to get done. I don't have time to be able to go through and chat with every single person. But I don't know that there is a shortcut or a cheat to be able to spot that talent other than meeting everybody and chatting with them. And what I find is folks like you're talking about that maybe don't have that skill set, they're usually relying on somebody else to point it out to them. They're oh well, I'm hoping my supervisor will point out this talented person. Well, now if your supervisor's shady as all get out, they won't. So the only way you're going to find them is to go chat with folks, right? And yep, that takes time, and that is not efficient in every sense of the word, and it's not convenient every time. It's just a commitment that people can recognize. Again, back to authenticity. It's the commitment that people recognize in you about a desire to grow them. And to your point, that's what you're talking about, Corri, is like, I've always wanted to grow people. I've always wanted to help people get where they're looking to go. So people trust you to develop them and give them that opportunity to grow. Not an easy question, though.
So I want to dive back a few steps into something that you mentioned in terms of, that peak of 85%, working at 85% of your capacity. And one of the realities that I am seeing in my own organization is that I have a lot of people who are impressive individuals. They have a deep commitment to the organization, to the community, sometimes not as deep a commitment to each other because they're so committed to the organization and to the community that they forget that they need one another to get things done. And what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing lately is that they're not operating at 85%, they're operating at 150%. That they have a internal drive that's pushing them, and there's a perception that ties to that drive, that if I don't do all of these things, I won't feel like I'm actually accomplishing anything. And we all know that when you're operating at 150%, you're not optimal. You're lucky to be standing upright at that point. And the question that I want to kind of dive towards is what I've seen in those individuals who I know are capable of such real contemplative, innovative concept building is that that's the part of their brain that shuts off when they're well over their capacity, and they're not comfortable being told that maybe you're working too hard and the wrong ways. You're working too hard thinking about just getting through the day, not about how your division or your department needs to move forward in the future, right? Because you're so overwhelmed. So as we're working to build resilience in individuals, the thing that I have struggled to let them to get them to keep, not let, but get them to keep, is this drive towards innovative thinking. So when we're over our heads, innovation is the first thing that feels like you got to drop it because it feels wasteful almost. How do you engage in that conversation when you feel like your folks are just they don't have the capacity to have a deep conversation about that?
Yeah, I mean, truly, when people are overworked, there's no easy answers, and that's the easy answer, and that's the truth of it. When it comes to the space of innovation, it's about helping people connect with what that means, and it can mean a lot of different things. But one, it's important to define what it means for your organization, and every organization and community is different. So that's part of how I measure innovation value and create innovation value differently than most other thought processes. Is we define what it means for your community. So there might be right types of innovation that's great for Mike's community or Corri's community that aren't great for yours. We don't want to value that in the same way. And so the other thing is that innovation and efficiency are used interchangeably, and that's an incredibly dangerous thing because they are not the same thing. And so when doing more with less, which is efficiency, ends up becoming the same mantra as innovation, that is a very difficult space to activate people out of, because efficiency is not a fun space necessarily to work in. It's certainly less fun than innovation if we're doing innovation right. Now, in the space of getting people on board with innovation when they're burnt out, again, I'd say it's back to that mindset of, we don't want the rest of you, we want the best of you. But part of that sort of mindset is about helping people understand something critical in this space, which is Innovation is the hedge against the risk of the way we've always done it. And if you can accept that, then can you also accept that along a certain time frame, every activity that we're engaging in today, along some timeline, will be obsolete? Everything. So if we can accept that, and we can accept this, then the only responsible thing for us to do is to talk about different ideas on how we can do service delivery or create a better whatever that might be. So part of it's helping people understand that, because they think of innovation as the thing to cut because it's necessary, but we don't talk about the risk of the way we've always done it and the dangers that that presents in the same way that we talk about the risk of innovation. Uh, and yet, at the same time, when we see the public's reaction to this, they don't like what government does. They're not usually, there's not a cheering section typically, except for us. And so they don't like what we do. Well, isn't that a marker of the way we've always done it becoming obsolete and then becoming frustrated with that? So if you want better relationships with the communities that you serve, shouldn't we be doing things to help create a different mindset around this? Now, that doesn't solve the problem of people feeling burnt out. But what it's about is creating the opportunities so that people see their ideas come to life. Do we have an innovation fund, even if it's small, to scholarship employee ideas? What happens from a good perspective in your organization when I come up with a new idea? Or is it on me to find the funding, take all the risk, right? Work through all the heartache with everybody? Or do we have a mechanism to support people as they go through that process? So if innovation only ever gets punished by the organization when it comes up, do we highlight the examples of people that succeeded, but also the people that failed? And I find that organizations that are talking about or have people who brag about the time it didn't work, those are organizations where their mindset is right when it comes to innovation, and we can actually do some really good work there. So those are the kinds of things. It's like, do you have an award or reward mechanism for new ideas? What happens when somebody submits something new? Do you have a mechanism to fund it? We know what's real in government is what gets funded. You can offer up lip service, but that lip service is just lip service. And so everybody knows whether you're full of it or whether you're authentic. So let's go ahead and, hey, build those things in. And once people start to see that this idea was funded, it was supported, they made it real, and it didn't work out, but they're still talking about it and they're still sharing it. And somebody else's idea did work out and it was also supported. You get a couple of those data points for people, you can start to get more ideas coming forward. It's just, what good is an idea if I'm just shouting into the ether and nobody's there to hear it? If it doesn't actually lead to anything, then why on earth would I keep doing this, especially when I'm at 150%? What I also find is it kind of ties into the burnout conversation that you're kind of edging around here a little bit. And I'll say that, the space of burnout in my experience is it's that you're not doing enough of the right things for yourself. It's not about cutting back everything you're doing. It's about making sure you're committing yourself to the right things. And Phil, I know you run. I watch sunrises and sunsets, right? These are the kinds of things we do for ourselves, even if they're small things, to put yourself back in balance so that you can go do the hard things that have to get done during the day. That is hard to encourage. It's important to encourage, but that's where we start to reclaim some of our employees' mental capacity for this kind of stuff.
So I find it incredibly hard to believe that you operate at 85% ever, because I feel like my cup is already more full. And if I'm not mistaken, you're going to have some special training sessions at ICMA. So if people want to work with you on some of the things you're talking about, what are those opportunities?
Yeah, well, there's 1.5 of them, so I'm really excited about this. The one that is, I'm doing pre-conference workshops, so I'm going to be doing the 5 tenets of high-performance government, and that is effective and innovative teams, building efficient processes, generating measurable, actionable results, doing it in a way that's clear and accountable, and then engaging your community. So I'll run through that framework and help folks understand the different opportunities inside of that. So that's one of them. And the other one is sustainability. This will be the 3rd year that I'm doing it. At this point, I think I'm half full on that one. And they said if I'm not 3/4 full, they'll cancel it. I don't know what that means, but regardless of whether they do that or not, I might just go to the freaking vendor hall and just teach it anyways because I'm bored and just love to talk with folks about this stuff. So those are the two opportunities: the power of sustainability, which is a deep dive into the innovation world and how we do it in local government, and how do we really build effective government, and what does that look like through the 5 tenets. So those are the two opportunities. And what's most exciting is that since I'm not on a main stage this year and I'm not doing breakouts and that kind of stuff, I get the chance to just come visit with folks. And so if folks want to chat about what they're going through, I'm on your team. So definitely always on people's team for that. So thanks for that opportunity to just plug it, Corri. Thanks.
No, I appreciate that. And Corri, thank you for being a well-organized host. I appreciate you doing that. I want to circle back to something that Phil asked a little bit, and it's related to this 85%. And so it's not a recurring theme yet, but we're working on this thing of like really interesting books that we read or things that we think are really compelling. And one of my favorite books ever written is called The Undoing Project. It follows the life of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. They're the two gentlemen who've invented and created behavioral economics. And there's this quote, and I had to pull it up on the Google machine. And Tversky said, "You waste years by not being able to waste hours." And so this concept of like spending time in thought with unstructured time with people to do reflection and planning and creativity, those things, that latent space about, okay, right, I don't have to run at 150%. And Phil, I would argue most people are probably 105, 106. I don't have the same level of burnout because I still get 8 hours of sleep every night. So I feel good about that. But I say that because that's a really important book for my own thinking and my own learning. So all of that long lead in is to, what are some of the books that you go back to and think about frequently or reread or are top of mind in some of your structured classes and things? What are some insights you can give to our listeners about books that have sort of shaped you?
Yeah, it's a fun one. So I'm a bit unusual in this space, which is this is my catharsis, which is I listen to the same books over and over and over again. And that's my style. And so the ones I listen to are actually the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit and the Harry Potter series. I listen to those basically on repeat, along with a few others. So I love the Count of Monte Cristo and Alexander Dumas and the Three Musketeers. So for me, I find reading books to be an interesting space for me. One thing is, so I was raised differently. Part of my thought process, I grew up with a very creative mother. She's a famous quilter in California. My dad was the president of Dow AgroSciences for their research and development. So very different upbringings on both sides of that equation. We had creativity exercise around my table. This was something that I grew up with from them. And so part of this was sort of the ability to self-generate unique thought is called divergent thinking. And it's something that I critically value. I find that introducing thoughts that shape my thinking are a dangerous space for me because it limits my ability to think critically through my own lens on different things. So I try not to ingest too much material. And I get this occasionally. Somebody would be like, "Oh, that's a Brene Brown thing." I'd be like, "I'm so glad she said it too." And so there's part of that. But what I'll say is one of them that was formative to my thinking was Buckminster Fuller's A Critical Path. I think that is one of the most difficult reads you will ever read, and also one of the most fascinating reads I have ever read. And for those that don't know, Buckminster Fuller, genius IQ, basically, a 1960s genius, if you will, 165 to 180 IQ, something in that neck of the woods, but invented the buckyball, which is a carbon molecule, invented geodesic dome designs, which is used, invented for practicality, East St. Louis, lots of different things he did during his career. But what he talks about was the critical path, which are the items what are the items in order that need to exist in what order in order for you to be successful in accomplishing something? And so that stuck with me as kind of a process person of like, okay, what is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things I need to worry about in order to get this long-term goal done? And that's where I turn all my focus and attention, is to focus on those things. And I don't sit here and worry about, okay, well, that's going to come down the line. And yep, that could be a problem, but for right now, I need to think about these 5 things, because if I don't get this one off the ground 5 months from now, it won't be done. So it's that thought process really changed kind of how I showed up and how I process information. I want to editorialize on something Mike said for a second too, which is this capacity to brainstorm. And I think there's a false narrative in there that I want to debunk personally for a second here, because um, the thought process is, and this is traditional thought, which is I put people in a room and then they come up with better ideas because I put them in a room and ask them some good questions or show them a problem. And I just want to deconstruct some of the fallacy in that for a second, because there's a better way to do it, which is, you know, I learn as an artist myself that creativity comes in waves. It comes when it wants to and it leaves when it wants to, not when you tell it to. And the way that we brainstorm today is I want you to show up at 8 a.m. on Monday. We have a problem that's existed for 30 years, and all I need for you to do is be infinitely creative in this 1 hour on demand. And that is insane. Because if I said to you, when are you creative? Are you a morning creative? Are you a middle of the night creative? Drinking and thinking, working out, right? Like, we're all creative at different times. So I have to respect when you feel creative, not when I tell you to feel creative, which means that's when you're capable of divergent thought or the ability to self-generate unique thought. So to that point, the real value doesn't always come in the room when we're brainstorming together, because I'll only say things in a room that are socially acceptable to others unless I have a very specific type of personality, which is very rare. So my goal is to collect ideas when you feel creative from you and be that neutral arbiter or collector of those before we get in the room, so that the ridiculous idea gets heard without you having to say it in front of other people who knows what that dynamic looks like. Because all we do then is do convergent thinking or socially acceptable thought. So I just offer that up as if you're looking to brainstorm, introduce the idea to people a week in advance and ask them when they feel creative this week to send you whatever brainwaves they have on it. And you'll get 25, 35% more creative ideas if you just do that. So just want to put that out there as maybe a foil to we need to have meetings to brainstorm new ideas. That's not always the most effective way to get there.
So it's funny, as you're telling that story, I had like this little flashback to my secret genius spot was driving down the street in front of the Broncos training facility in Centennial. If I needed to have like an aha moment, inevitably that was the exact spot. And so it wasn't prescribed. It was this random drive between the office and home where I would have that's it moment. And then the trick is to write it down while you're driving.
Right. There's ways to do that too, but yes, that's it. Yeah, don't wreck the car and get the idea. I love it.
So I want to talk a little bit about finding creative space. I think, Nick, you are an incredibly gifted photographer. For those people who don't see the photographs that you frequently post on LinkedIn, there's some amazing stuff that you have pushed out there. I have always struggled with photography because photography is both an exercise in patience and an exercise in kind of seeing what's coming next and being ready for it. I am frequently capable of taking a picture of something after it has already moved out of the frame, right? Like, it's like, oh my God, I got to get that picture. And it's flown away by the point I pulled my phone out and I'm, trying to clumsily get there. And I think it ties into what you were just talking about, right? Creativity is something that you have to make space for. You have to give time to. You have to be willing to be patient with. It doesn't just happen. You can't just fall into it. And my sense, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, my sense is what I've seen of the pictures that you snap, and I want to talk a little bit about climbing mountain peaks in Colorado, because I'm guessing that's where you had the opportunity to snap some of those. How does that tie into that creative space you were just talking about, where you're trying to come up with the solution, and it's not something that you can just sit down at this very prescribed hour of the day and say, right now I shall come up with all of my ideas and I will then execute upon them in the other prescribed hours that I have laid out in front of me. Obviously, it's much, much messier than that. But how do you tie those two things together?
Well, thanks for the compliment on the photography. It's an art form that I love and I really enjoy. And for me, it's a marriage of some things that make a lot of sense for this conversation, which is it's preparation plus opportunity. I mean, and I think that's a lot of the work that everybody who listens to to this is looking for. It's you have to put in the work up front. I didn't know how to operate a camera 7 years ago. I had no idea how to operate a camera. Um, what I've always had is an eye. I can see things that others can't see, and that's been a gift that I've had from my work in local government, but before that and after that, and I think I give credit to my folks and my upbringing for a lot of that capability, but I see the thing that's about to happen. It makes me look prescient because I'm prepared for the thing that's about to happen, and I have a little bit of luck because the thing about a photo is it only happens in a moment. So there is no later for this. I was chasing to your point, Phil, I was chasing the aurora. So I took these great aurora photos the other night, actually a couple months ago. They were wonderful. It was a low probability. I was like, I'm going to go chase this and see what I can find. I had to get out of town. I had to drive, all this kind of stuff. I happened to go out at midnight and catch it on a Tuesday and got some amazing photos. I chased it this last week. I chased it again the week before, and nothing struck out and was out for hours and struck out. I was prepared. The opportunity wasn't there though. And I think that's so much of life, which is the moment that it happens is the only moment that you can make that choice. And then the moment passes you by. And timing matters so much in our lives that we don't really focus or pay attention to, and just from a career perspective, tying that together, early on in your career, I'm sure there was something that any one of us had presented and it was like, well, that's never going to fly. And then 5 years later, somebody else presents it, and it's like, that's a great idea, and it's like, what the heck, um, that's so much of our existence, I think. And so, to my mind, it's can you put yourself in a position to have the opportunity to see that, but are you prepared for when the opportunity shows up? And so that's how my photography mind works. Is sometimes not to push back on the point, but sometimes I'll grab the camera and put one lens on it and that's the only lens I'm going to use for the day. And then I'm going to drive around and look for things with that lens on it. Not the close-up stuff. I'm not switching out lenses. I'm just looking at the stuff that's far away. And that helps me keep, because vision's about focus and perspective. Can you see the big picture and then can you focus on the things that are truly important? Photography is the same way. So that's kind of where I'm at with it, which is, let's do some work, understand how to work the equipment, which I don't always know how to do. There's great photographers out there that are true pros, and then there's the work that I do, which is somewhere above an amateur and below a professional. I've been told my art is very commercial, said the old lady who showed up at my art opening, and you know, um, and I was like, "Thank you very much," and she's like, "That's not a compliment," and I'm like, "I choose not to hear you." So I really appreciate you showing up here. Why don't you go ahead and buy something off my walls? You look rich enough to afford it. So you know, just opportunity.
Humility is an important factor in virtually everything, especially the work that we all do. So yeah,
Cheers.
that's always great. Hey, so let's talk a little bit about climbing mountains and climbing the 14ers. I've never heard that term before. I'd love if you could explain what that is and why do it.
Yeah, I think my wife might ask the same question. Um, they're the 14,000-foot mountains of Colorado, affectionately referred to in the state as the 14ers. So there's 58 peaks that are over 14,000 foot in elevation. And, I started years ago, and I tried to hike one and I did it. It was Pikes Peak. And I was like, holy cow, this is amazing. I hiked a mountain. I just wanted to hike a mountain. And then it became sort of this thing that I do. And then it became a ritual. And there are people who've hiked all of them. And I think that's totally amazing, but for me, I don't know that will be my path. I'm on 27 right now out of the 58. I've done quite a few of them, the ones that I can do. Some of them are very spicy. They're what they call class 4, where you're climbing up stuff that's pretty crazy. I don't know that I'm that cat. I'll find out later in life, but today I'm not there, and so I've just been working my way through them because it's a reminder to me. I find a lesson on the mountain every time. Every single time I do it, I find a lesson there. Nature is a cleansing and connecting force for me. So for me, it was incredibly important, to be connected to nature. And I find the ability to understand things better in that environment But even simple lessons like, life is about grit and determination and your resilience. That's where you learn it from. There's always a moment where you want to quit when you're hiking a mountain like that. You're doing 5,000 feet of elevation gain and 11 miles, and weather's coming in, and there's unforeseen this, and you got to rock scramble this, and there's a mountain goat or whatever. So whatever it is, it's always figure it out. And I like that because it plays into what I consider to be a strength, which is the mental resilience, things I like to put into it. Can you be prepared? And then can you figure out the things that you're not prepared for, which I think is just a perfect metaphor for life, as well as the part where at some point it becomes about just putting one foot in front of the other. And I really like that as part of the analogy of life. It's just one foot in front of the other. And so there's just these wonderful analogies that I find when I do mountain climbing and mountain hiking. And I think to myself, well, you're at 14,000 feet when you start negotiating for oxygen like it's a union contract. You know what I mean? So like, there's there's just a space where you kind of learn a new part about yourself that you never just really saw coming before. So that's why I like it. And everyone's different. Some of them are boring, and it's like this is a slog, and other ones are like this is Disney. What majesty am I in here? So yeah, it's a lot of fun in some twisted ways.
So, one of the other things you had shared with us offline is an initiative that involves barbecue. And I feel very hungry right now. So, let's dig into talking about barbecue because I really miss green chili. You don't get Pueblos here in Iowa. Like, I have to have them imported from family. So, I want to hear about great Colorado food.
I love it. Yeah, actually, I've got green chili in the fridge right now, Corey, and I travel, and for those that don't know, green chili is pork and green chilies, and it's either New Mexico or Colorado predominantly. There's a little bit of Texas, a little bit of Arizona, but really those are the two states where you're going to get it. If you ever have the chance, just eat it. It's magical. It's the greatest vitamin C delivery system the world has ever known. So that's all I'm going to say about that. But yeah, what we were talking about was the Beyond the Smoke events, and I'm really excited about this. So, this has been a labor of love. I've won a couple of competitions for ribs in my day, and I cook barbecue all the time, and barbecue is one of my side hobbies / professions, if you will. A couple of years ago, I was working in Bakersfield, California, and I got a call from the police chief and the HR director, and the police chief said, "Hey, Nick, I'd like you to come on." I'd done some work with them for about a year. And he's like, "Look, I'm struggling with some of the lieutenants. I want them to come together as a team." He's like, "But here's what I don't want. I don't want them to do a fast driving course. I don't want them doing paintball. I don't want them throwing axes. I don't want them stabbing anything, wrestling gators, like whatever. No macho craziness, right? Can you come up with something that would be appropriate for them, but also this?" So I was like, what about barbecue? What about if you got a barbecue joint to come in and teach them how to cook and all this kind of. Fast forward, and I show up there, and I'd had the barbecue in Bakersfield before, and love Bakersfield, but not their barbecue. They're the barbecue capital of California, which means virtually nothing in the real world is what I'll say. So I thought it was just going to be this terrible barbecue, but I showed up and I fangirled hard because the person who showed up was barbecue pitmaster Harry Sue, who won season 1 of the Food Network's Barbecue Pitmasters. This is a guy who knows what he's doing. Well, it turns out that Harry used to work in LA Utilities and used to be a local government employee back in the day. So I took the lessons from the barbecue, the teamwork, the leadership, and we ran them through basically a Food Network style event where they learned barbecue from Harry, and then they had to go through teamwork development, leadership development in that process. And then I turned it into lessons on day 2 and taught it and created the lessons and the narratives after it. That struck me as something that I wanted to keep doing because it mixed my passions up very nicely. Called up Harry. He's like, "I'm in." We did our first event in Allen, Texas, 3 years ago. And this is our 3rd annual this year. It's coming up in October. It's the only event that we have open to the public this year. So if you're in the Dallas, Texas area and you would like to have a team, we have 2 team spots left, and otherwise the event's sold out. We've got Royal Oak, Michigan coming up with Joseph and Susan up there. So that's a private event up there. We've got Southern Pines, North Carolina coming up. We've got Brownsville, Texas coming up. We did Hilton Head, South Carolina, Cincinnati. So we've created a unique experience that is designed to help you experience what teamwork and leadership looks like through the lens of a barbecue competition and also a series of experiences, and that's day 2. what I love about this and what's different about this is it's not listening to somebody talk about teamwork. It is experiencing it. And it doesn't matter how well you can cook. 60% of the score is how you come together as a team. So the nice part is you learn barbecue from a pitmaster, but really the whole point is you are learning as a team about how you come together under unknown circumstances, which the only way we ever find that out is usually during a crisis or an emergency. So this is us getting a chance to practice and play in the sandbox together, and learn about life, love, creativity, leadership, and barbecue. So that's the events, and yeah, we're doing these, and it's spinning up every year. We're having more and more of these events, but let's call it unique teamwork and development efforts, partnering with a grand champion pitmaster. So really loving these events and so excited because I've met some incredible cooks, and this year Nacho Plano Barbecue. That's Plano, Texas, by the way. Nacho Plano Barbecue is coming back to try and defend their title for the third time in this one. So I'm hoping somebody can take them out because they're talking a lot of smack is all I'm getting at.
Well, that sounds like the most fun leadership development training and probably the best tasting. Like, right, we've all sat in like nondescript hotel conference rooms. This is probably not that experience. If people are interested, how do they get a hold of you, Nick?
Yeah, beyondthesmoke.net, or just hit me up on LinkedIn. But if you Google Beyond the Smoke, we've got that. So you can type that in and yeah, it'll take you right there and learn about the events or just ask more about it. Be happy to chat about it. And you're right. You've never, like, people talk about trust falls, but that's not trust. Trust is trusting somebody with your brisket. That's trust. Okay. So
I
like,
love it.
and there's no, you can't bond over PowerPoint, but you can bond over burnt chicken. Okay. Like that's what I'm saying
Absolutely.
here. So like, that's how we're trying to roll.
Absolutely. All right. So I'm going to transition a little bit. So I appreciate that. So one of the bits that we have on this when we have guests, and we think you've probably watched an episode, maybe an episode and a half, or like that. Maybe hopefully people have done that. What questions do you have for us that might pop up, or things that you're curious about? Of like, why did these three strangers decide to do this kind of thing together?
I think for me, it would be coming back to what do you think is the most underrated thing that somebody who's a city manager can do for their employees on behalf of the community? So the goal here is like, what can we do to service the community, but also in the space of helping our employees connect with that? Is there anything that kind of comes to mind? I think there's the traditional stuff, but what comes to your mind in that space of that connection?
Corri, I'm going to choose you to go first.
I felt it coming. It was like the energy came right through the camera. I think in some ways, as we came out of COVID and got ARPA funding, so in Davenport, we got $41.9 million. That was that moment because you had a shot clock attached to the money. You had some constraints, but there was also a lot of room to be creative. And we kind of sent that out to the staff and said, this is a moment we're never going to see again in history. Dream big. Think of the things none of us have thought about because you've never had time. Midwestern community, lost population, challenging budgets, right? Like the classic story of the Midwest. And the council got the same opportunity. It was like, dream big. And then we went through an evaluation process. And that was probably one of the coolest opportunities from teamwork, from making an impact to the community. Because while it had constraints, it also had the opportunity to be like, how can we push on that boundary and be creative about how we design whatever the thing we're going to do is and make a meaningful impact. And so both the elected body and the staff team crushed it. I mean, we invested in neighborhood parks and disenfranchised neighborhoods. We're building a park on the riverfront, world-class opportunity. We extended sewer lines for the future of economic development, right? These were things that maybe one or two of them would have happened on the increment, but not all of them would have happened in a 3-year period. And they all did.
Such a great, unique moment in time, too, to be able to, and again, constraints, but not in the way that we would think, too. So much flexibility inside that money once you read the fine print enough to be able to do it. And certainly a lot of communities went a very traditional route, and it's great I love the communities that were like, we're going to try some very different stuff here. And like you said, even infrastructure. Now it's prepped for economic development, right? There's opportunity there that wasn't there before. I love that.
So I love that. That's great. Great example, Corey. Mine is not quite as kind of transformational, but we have started to do more with pushing the employees out into events. And this summer, the public safety department was kind of tasked with coming up with ways to tie some of their training in with the community so that the community had an understanding of what they were doing. They had a chance to kind of do training in a unique environment. And they came up with these great ideas of all the Tuesdays in the month of August. They went to different locations in the community and they did different fire training in each of those locations and tied that into a community outreach event. And so the kids in the neighborhood just had to walk down the block. They got to see all the fire apparatus in action. They got to see the fire hoses. They got to talk to the officers about what it is they were doing and why they did it. And watching these events with the opportunity for not just the kids, but the parents and the grandparents and everybody else in the neighborhood to see the light bulbs go off over their heads. We're like, wow, you really, like, I didn't realize that's the kind of training you guys have to do for extraction or for clearing a fire scene, or if there's an active fire, this is the way you unroll the hoses. And everybody walked away from those opportunities with something. Our team walked away with the chance to know that the community really actually appreciates the work that they do, and they didn't hear it filtered through something. They heard it directly from the mouths of the community. They got to engage with the kids and put them in the front seat of the fire engine and laugh and giggle about things for a few minutes. And the community, in turn, had a better understanding that these things don't just happen, right? You don't just have a fire get put out. It's not something you snap your fingers for. It's something you train for every week, all year, every year. This is not just, it's not anomalous. These are things that are real. And these are why we have all of these pieces of equipment. This is what they do. This is their purpose. It's not just civic pride in the 4th of July parade to see the fire engines pulling through. They have purpose and need and require, and they're required. And it was just such a great opportunity for engagement. And I think it humanizes our team, right? And it brings them together with the people that they serve, and they humanize both sides at the same time, and they build relationships. I just loved seeing it happen.
What a great what a great ability to connect that, because touch a truck events are great, but that's different. That is all of the things that are necessary to have the understanding of not just the equipment, but the people behind the equipment, the work that goes into the people, and so forth, and also, a positive touch point that they otherwise wouldn't have.
As a community that has our Touch a Truck event on Friday, September 19th, you're all welcome to
Which
come
is
to
fantastic
Maplewood.
too, Mike.
But no, this is what's super fast. Like, this
Love
was
it.
the
I love
value of the value of the podcast is I
Yep.
now have a new idea for how to do, like, we're going to do training anyways. We're going to do Touch a Truck anyways. Why don't we merge them in a way that actually creates value on both sides? So, Phil, congratulations. You get 5 stars for idea of the day. So I appreciate that. It's appropriate that it's on Innovation Day. So I'm not even going to answer the question because you guys just crushed it, and just there's nothing I could say that would be better. But we're coming near the end of the podcast. Nick, is there anything that we can do as local government professionals and leaders in our organizations, leaders in our state associations, leaders in ICMA? Are there things that local government professionals can do to better serve? Right? I mean, you're a consultant. We hire consultants all the time. We like you. We want you to be successful. What are the things that we do that irritate you that we could be better at?
Oh, the list.
Yeah, no, I want the list. Like, this is the secret sauce because nobody tells us this list, right? It's said in secret. It's said in the back room. Like, geez, you're among friends. There's only a couple of people listening. Just
Sure. No,
share, share.
I'll just know this, I'm going to blurt it out and we're just going to talk straight about a couple things here. One, I'll say, fix your RFP processes, cut that nonsense out. Okay. By the way, if I'm a sole proprietor LLC and I'm doing work with you remotely, I do not need to provide you with automobile insurance. I don't need to provide you with workers' comp insurance because I'm just me. So please stop requiring that as part of your thing. Talk to your legal team about this. But if I could get in, if I could do one session alone on just the experiences I have in different states, RFP wise, to get to be able to work with you, that would be a whole fascinating episode. No, it wouldn't be fascinating. It would be a soul sucking endeavor, that truly would underscore certain things. But, leaving that off, I'll say the advocacy from ICMA is something that I struggle with a little bit, and I'll just be as advocates for the profession and somebody who likes ICMA as well. Like Tanya's a friend, somebody I consider. Julia, I love her. I love the organization and its intent. I think the application of its ethics process is flawed, and I think that what it does is it prohibits people from recommending people who they've worked with who do great work for them. And that in turn stifles innovation and the creativity. You referred to me as a consultant, and I reject that badge on a lot of cases because I don't consider, and whatever, it's a fine term.
Sure.
Vendor
No,
and
yeah. I would actually, I mean, if I were to invite you into my organization, I would actually call you a partner.
Right. That's
how
the term
I would
that I
do it.
use, Mike. Yeah. I use that term almost exclusively. I'm a partner, and I think there's a very important difference there, and I talk about this. A vendor is somebody who sells you a product or sells you something and walks away afterwards. A partner is somebody who stays with you and makes sure that you're successful using whatever it is they came to bring to you. And I know vendors, and I could name them off, and I would be happy to do that on another show. And I know partners, and there's a big difference, but partners have no advantage over vendors in an ICMA's world because of the ethics provisions in the city, in the the code. If you take so I've had groups that I've worked with where city managers are like, Nick's the person, and I do only government to government sales. I don't do advertising. I just get recommended from one community to another and keep working with them. That's how I do my business. When the people who I've worked with, because they ascend into the top role and then get the credentialing, can no longer talk about the work that I do with them because it violates the ethics policy, we've missed the point of what the policy was trying to do, which was prevent favoritism and prevent nepotism or kickbacks and all that kind of stuff. A very worthy cause. So that would be an ask that I would have of the profession in general, is push back so that partners can be identified differently than vendors, or at least find some negotiated ground where there is a difference between somebody who has benefited your organization or community. I mean, we can't present together. We can love each other. We can't present together. That's a violation of the policy. You can't talk about it. You can't advocate for it. But if you don't know me and we don't do work together, you could talk about me all day. That's pretty jacked up. So I'm just saying, on the real, what they're after is a good thing. And I think if there was a way to revise that, it would help out for those who do government to government relationships only, like myself. And the folks that I have on my partners page, they're smaller organizations that can't pay ICMA $12,000 to have a 10 by 10 booth.
Yeah.
But they're talented, gifted people who are doing exactly the type of work that ICMA is advocating for. I'm here to be your partner. I want others who want that same thing to be there, but separate us out from the vendors and the consultants who want the money with no intent of understanding what we're about, and free up the city managers or the assistant city managers of those who go receive the certification from, and again, not advocating for, but talking about positive experiences they've had with people that have helped them. It is an innovation stifler to not be able to talk about that. No, but that may be a little too on the nose. Love you. Love you.
I appreciate this is where this is where we have bold conversations. This is where we have bold ideas. Corri and I routinely talk about this, about the inability for institutions to adapt to disruption. And so, Corri, I'm going to turn it over to you because I know that you're going to be more articulated about it than I am going to be, but also I think this is really central to sort of your research and your writing and your thinking lately. So I'm turning it over to you about how do we handle disruption in institutions?
Yeah. So I felt it was like a double softball. I feel grateful. So disruption is kind of my favorite thing to think about, Nick. And so it falls into we'll call it the sport of innovation. But I think about it a lot. And so whether it's a government organization or not-for-profits, I think there is a fear of the unknown. You've mentioned that through this conversation. And we've become intolerant to allowing mistakes, dare I say, encouraging mistakes, right? And one of the things that I love about how you approach partnership and the team you're working with, your team, is I feel like we're at a state of disruption in the consulting world. Yes, there are big consultants. Yes, they provide meaningful services. Yes, everyone has a couple names that they just thought of that they'd prefer to never work with again, but you can't because they've bought up everything else and you're stuck with them now. But what you've done, and I think there's this really interesting point that we're living through right now, is the disruptors, the innovators, the dreamers are coming together. They're finding their slice of the pie. And I've heard about this through a lot of the nonprofits that are thinking about the world differently too, is I don't want to hire the big institution that has the big, list of everyone they've ever worked for. I want to hire the nimble, the smart, the creative, who has a really great network, right? Think of it as a matrix network that can give me the pieces I need right now and can dig in to those relationships and give me the pieces I'm going to need at step 2 or 3. And that's where I think it's like super genius to build this consortium, not with the goal of building the biggest consulting practice ever, right? Because I think that era is dying in front of our eyes. But to have people who excel at this thing that they're really gifted at, and to have a network of people working together to further, in this case, local government as a profession.
I'm with you 100% on that, Corri. And I just want to add on to that, which is the partners page that I have on mine is the exact thing you're describing, which is a group of independent folks. I have no desire to build a larger organization. Phil, you said, how do you sleep, right? You don't sleep in that, I get it. It looks like that. I take off a ton of time. I take a ton of time off. I spend the summer doing my own thing. And I'm big on that. I have no desire to work harder. I'm not here to do that. I don't want to grow a business that's massive and do that. That's not what I'm after. I want to know the players who are capable of the unique offerings that I don't offer, who are exceptional in their field, and just refer you to them because I know they're great at what they do. I'm not looking to gobble up the world. So I just want to know the players that I can turn around and recommend, because I don't do code enforcement, for example. But I know a guy named Mitch, the code enforcement guy, who's fantastic, and we've chatted, and he knows his work inside and out. I don't want that work. But when people have that need, I know that Mitch handles that work incredibly well, right? So it's just, here's the handoff, and that's the value that I'm bringing, is connectivity and connection in our space. I just want to know who the players are so that I can farm them out to the people who have the need. And that's all I'm looking to do. So I'm with you on that, which is, I think the day of the big consultant who is giving you generic product is over. And if it's not, well, it damn well should be.
So before we sign off, there's something that I am just desperate to know a little bit more about. I alluded to it in the intro way back, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours ago. And that is this book of made up words that you are about finished with. Sniglets, I believe, is its title. I got to know a little more about it.
Yeah, it's Sniglets Reloaded is coming out. I believe I'll get the first copy here on Friday, in which case make some revisions and have it. But over the course of the last decade and a half, I have used Sniglets, which is a made-up term, which means any word that should be in the dictionary but isn't, as a launching pad for success in my life and career. I have collected them over the course of the last decade to decade and a half. The only thing I lacked was the ability to, and I love the power of a made-up word. The fact is, every single word we're using today was made up by somebody, so why not you? The only thing I lacked was the ability to draw, so I could never bring it to life because I couldn't do that. So what I did in this case was I used first-generation generative AI photos in order to actually do this for every single one of the words that I have. And so I've got 100 of them in this book. And I'll give you a couple if you want a couple examples. I've got a couple here. Okay. So one was bureaucracide. right? Death by bureaucracy, prevalent in government and HR. It's death by 10,000 paper cuts, or bedazzlish, right? Anytime visual appeal has been liberally substituted for effective process. And I know we're in the budget season right now, and I think sometimes we see this, right? Like, what does this mean? Well, it is pretty, so there's that. Or how about the exasperilla, which some of us might be enjoying tonight, which is that drink you grab to calm yourself down after a ridiculously tough day at work.
Never had
So
those.
the
Nope,
exasperilla, so
Those
for me,
those only happen on council nights, really exclusively. That's brilliant. I love that. I need
I
one
feel
of
like that could have
those.
been the actual definition right there too, Mike.
Uh-huh.
A council related drink. There's 100 of these at any rate. These are a couple of them. I wrote it because everything's a pretty serious place right now in the world. And I think that comedy and humor in general, just even a little touch point of something slightly ridiculous that we all think about, but nobody ever puts a name to, might be a little bit of relief in an otherwise all too serious world. And so it's a departure from things I've done in the past, but Sustainnovation itself is a sniglet. And so I'm excited to put it out there. It's utterly ridiculous. It's a total passion project, and I'm excited to get it out there and hopefully make people roll their eyes or groan. Like it's basically a book of dad jokes done horribly wrong. So that's my goal.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That is nightstand reading for me, in every sense of the word. Nick, it has been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. I've got your book here in front of me, and I suggest people pick it up. It's on Amazon. It's in a number of different places. Innovation.us that's your website. You dropped the other website that I want to repeat, which is beyondthesmoke.net. You are available and visible on LinkedIn, in a number of platforms. You're going to be at ICMA in Tampa in a month and a half. We can't wait to see you and have the opportunity to connect in person. Thank you for being here. You're one of those individuals that, when I think about inspirational people who help me do my job perhaps somewhat better, I've got to do the work, but I look to you and I look to the things that you've said and the things that you've done and the way that you've said and done them, as models. And I'm just privileged to have the opportunity to say that publicly. You're a great person, a great leader, and it's been a great conversation.